They told me Camp Echo Pine was a place for troubled teens to reconnect with nature and themselves. But the moment I arrived, I knew something was wrong. The woods were too quiet. The smiles were too forced. And then came the list of rules. Rules that made no sense, rules that had to be followed. Or else. I should have left, but it was already too late. I took the job because I needed a fresh start. I'd spent the last 2 years scraping by as a substitute teacher, working late-night bar shifts just to cover rent. When I saw the ad for a summer counselor at Camp Echo Pine, competitive pay, private cabin, meals included, it felt like the universe was finally giving me a break. They called it a wilderness rehabilitation camp, nestled deep in the Oregon woods, and advertised it as a place for teens with emotional or behavioral issues. Nature therapy, group bonding, detox from tech. The usual modern fixes for old school problems. I wasn't picky. I filled out the forms, passed the background check, and 2 weeks later, I was on a bus headed through dense pine-covered hills, watching cell reception disappear bar by bar. It was dusk when I finally arrived. The driver didn't speak a word, just nodded toward a dirt path before speeding off like he couldn't get out of there fast enough. I stood there with my duffel bag, the last orange sliver of daylight slipping beneath the treetops, and felt a strange unease settle in my chest. Camp Echo Pine looked exactly like the pictures. Wooden cabins, a central fire pit, a mess hall. But something about it fell off, like a diorama of a camp rather than a real one. Too perfect, too still. A woman in her late 50s greeted me by the flagpole. Her name was Martha, gray hair tied tight in a bun, clipboard clutched in her arms like a weapon. Her eyes scanned me like a security camera, not unkind but deeply calculating. "You must be Daniel," she said. "Right on time. Follow me. We've already finished dinner." As I walked beside her toward the main office, I noticed the woods around the camp were silent. No crickets, no owls, not even the rustle of wind through the trees. Just the sound of our footsteps crunching gravel. "You'll meet the campers tomorrow morning," Martha continued. "But first, we need to go over the counselor rules. Camp Echo Pine is unique. There are certain protocols we follow to ensure everyone's safety. Do you understand?" I nodded. What else was I supposed to do? The rules were typed neatly on a single laminated sheet inside the office. Martha handed it to me like it was a sacred text. Rules for Camp Echo Pine staff counselors. 1. Never enter the woods after sundown. 2. Never speak the campers' full names aloud. 3. If you hear your name whisper from the trees, do not respond. 4. Lights out means all lights out. No exceptions. 5. The lake is off limits, even during the day. 6. If a camper claims to see the pale one, report immediately to Martha. 7. Do not, under any circumstance, remove your camp bracelet. I stared at the list, waiting for her to laugh. She didn't. "You'll get your bracelet before bed," she said, moving on like I just signed an NDA. "Once it's on, it stays on. Think of it as a safety tether." "What exactly is the pale one?" I asked. Martha looked at me for a long time. "Let's hope you never find out." She showed me to my cabin, modest, clean, with a bunk bed and a small desk. A camp-issued flashlight sat on the nightstand. Then she handed me a dark red Faber bracelet with a small bronze medallion woven into it, etched with a pine tree symbol. "You'll wear this at all times," she said. "And remember, follow the rules." That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence outside was oppressive. I kept waiting for the usual sounds of the summer forest. frogs croaking, bugs buzzing, leaves rustling, but it was like the woods were holding their breath. Around midnight, I thought I heard something move just beyond my window, a soft shuffling like bare feet on dead leaves. I sat up, clutching the flashlight, heart racing, but when I peered out into the darkness, there was nothing, just the still black outline of the pines. Morning came reluctantly, with a dull gray haze clinging to the sky. I met the other counselors at the mess hall. There were 5 of them, all around my age or younger. One guy might look like he belonged in an REI ad. Beard, flannel, friendly. Another, Jess, was tall and sharp-eyed, with a no-nonsense vibe. The others, Luis, Brittany, and Taylor, seemed fine enough, but there was a strange tension in the air, like everyone was pretending to be chill while keeping one eye on the woods. Campers began arriving in groups, dropped off by vans from nearby cities. They were a rough mix, some quiet and withdrawn, others rowdy and sarcastic. All of them had bracelets like mine, except theirs were different colors. Some blue, some green, some black. That's their behavioral level, Jess explained. Green's good, blue's stable. Black, be careful with black. My assigned cabin, Cedar 4, had 6 teens, 2 green, 3 blue, and 1 black. The black bracelet belonged to a wiry kid named Marcus. He didn't speak much, just stared. His eyes were too old for his face. During orientation, Martha gave her speech about nature, self-improvement, and growth. The usual, but then she read the camp rules aloud. The same rules I'd seen in her office, except this version left out one important detail, the pale one. She didn't mention it at all. When I asked Jess about it later, she shook her head. Don't bring it up unless you have to, she warned. It's not a myth. Just don't. By day, the camp almost seemed normal. We did hiking, fire building exercises, team games. I kept an eye on Marcus. He barely participated, and more than once I caught him staring out into the trees like he was listening for something. Things started going wrong on the 3rd night. Lights out was at 9:30. I did my rounds, made sure the kids were in bed, and returned to my cabin by 10. But just after midnight, I heard footsteps. Not near my cabin, inside it. I flicked on the flashlight and nearly dropped it when I saw the door creak open by itself. I stepped out onto the porch, sweeping the beam across the trees. That's when I heard it. Faint, distant, a voice whispering, "Daniel." I froze. The voice was soft, female, familiar, but there was no one there. Just shadows and trunks and silence. I shut the door, locked it, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I went to Martha. I heard something last night. I told her. A voice. It said my name. She grew pale. Did you respond? She asked quickly. No. Her shoulders relaxed. Barely. You're lucky. Don't listen to it. It'll mimic whatever voice gets a reaction from you. It's how it gets in. In? Gets in where? But she wouldn't say more. Just reminded me to keep my bracelet on. Later that day, one of the Green Band kids, a girl named Hannah, approached me during archery. Her eyes were wide, scared. Marcus told me the lake is hungry, she whispered. What does that mean? He says it watches him at night, from the trees. I found Marcus sitting alone near the fire pit after lunch. When I asked him about it, he didn't deny it. She calls to me, he said. Who does? The pale one. She said I'll be free soon. I reported it to Martha. She didn't ask for details, just nodded grimly and said, keep him close. That night, Marcus was missing from bed check. I searched the cabin, the mess hall, the bathhouse. Nothing. Then I noticed the trail down to the lake had fresh footprints in the mud. I grabbed my flashlight and jogged down the hill, heart pounding. The lake was still, a sheet of black glass. Fog clung low over the surface. I saw him standing at the dock's edge, arms outstretched, like he was waiting for something to pull him forward. "Marcus!" I shouted. He turned slowly, face blank. "She's here," he whispered. I rushed forward and grabbed him before he could step off. His skin was cold. His eyes were wrong, clouded, like he'd seen something that didn't belong in this world. I hauled him back to his cabin and stayed outside his door all night. He didn't sleep, just lay in his bunk, eyes open. The next morning, Martha took him to the infirmary. "He'll be monitored," she said. "We'll see if it passes." "If what passes?" But again, she wouldn't answer. I'm starting to realize that Camp Echo Pine isn't a place for healing. It's a place for hiding. And something in these woods wants to be found. Marcus wasn't the first camper to hear voices in the woods, but he was the first to answer back. Ever since that night at the lake, he hasn't been the same. Something followed him back. The other campers whisper about shadows watching them and figures moving just beyond the trees. But it's not just the kids. Now, I hear it too. My name, drifting through the pines, sweeter each time it calls. The rules are getting harder to follow, and the forest knows. The next morning after Marcus was taken to the infirmary, the air felt different. Heaviness hung over the camp like low fog, thick and pressing. I barely slept the night before, and what little sleep I got was filled with dreams I couldn't shake. Trees whispering in languages I didn't understand, eyes blinking open in the dirt, the lake rippling like it was breathing. At breakfast, none of the kids talked about Marcus. I thought they might ask where he went, or if he was okay. But it was like he'd been erased. Even Hannah, the green band girl who confided in me, avoided eye contact. "They'll forget soon," Jess said quietly when I mentioned it. "The camp does that." "What do you mean the camp does that?" She only shook her head and muttered, "Just keep them busy." After breakfast, I led my cabin in the usual trust-building activities. A ropes course, then canoe safety, though we never actually used the canoes. But even with the sun out, a strange tension lingered in the trees. It was in the way the leaves trembled despite no wind, in the way birds perched silently and stared too long, in the way Marcus's name hovered unspoken in every camper's eyes. That night, it escalated. I was doing a final cabin check when Luis, the most easygoing of the counselors, ran up to me, pale and shaking. "I heard it," he gasped. "It said my name, from the woods. It sounded like my brother. He died last year." I didn't know what to say. "Did you answer?" "No, but I almost did." Jess found us on the path and pulled us into the mess hall, locking the door behind her. "This is how it starts," she said, voice low. "First the voice, then the dreams, then the hunger." Louise sat down hard on a bench. "Hunger. She wants you to come willingly," Jess said. "It's not enough to drag you out. That's not how it works." "What is it?" I demanded. "The pale one." Jess hesitated, then nodded. "She's ancient, older than this land. The camp was built to contain her, not to help kids. That's what the bracelets are for." I looked down at mine, still snug on my wrist, the bronze pine symbol dull in the lantern light. Jess continued, "The bracelet's metal is an old alloy, iron and something else. It keeps her out, but only if you don't invite her. Invite her how? By speaking back, by dreaming of her, by breaking the rules." Luis shook his head. "Why are the kids even here?" "Some of them are sensitive. They hear her easier. She feeds on that. The camp thinks exposure makes them stronger, like exposure therapy. But they're wrong. She doesn't want to be endured. She wants to be worshipped. The conversation was interrupted by a scream. We bolted out of the mess hall. The scream had come from the direction of the girls' cabins. By the time we got there, chaos had erupted. 3 girls were standing outside, crying and pointing at one of the cabins. "She's gone," one of them sobbed. "Emily's gone. She just disappeared." The door was wide open. Inside, the bunk was empty, the blanket neatly folded. Too neat. Jess scanned the room, then checked the windows. No sign of forced entry. No signs of struggle. Just absence. "Where's her bracelet?" Luis asked. I looked again. On the floor, near the foot of the bed, was the red band. Unlatched, like she'd taken it off willingly. "Oh no," Jess whispered. We split into groups to search. Flashlights swept the woods. Voices called out her name, though Jess warned us not to say it more than once. After an hour, we regrouped. No tracks, no scent, nothing. Martha called an emergency staff meeting at dawn. She stood before us in the central lodge, her voice calm but stern. "Campers will be told Emily was removed due to behavioral issues. No one is to speak of what happened. Not to the kids. Not to each other. Not outside this camp. That girl didn't run away." Jess snapped. "You know that." Martha's eyes sharpened. "Do you have evidence of anything else?" No one answered. Martha turned her gaze to me. "Have you seen anything, Daniel?" I hesitated. I wanted to tell her about Marcus, about the lake, about the whispers, but something in her expression stopped me. A flicker of something, not quite human. "No," I lied. "Nothing concrete." She nodded once. Then we continue as usual. Dismissed. Jess cornered me afterward. "She knows more than she lets on," she hissed. "She's not protecting us. She's managing us. Like we're inventory. Then why stay? Because if I leave, she'll follow." The campers began acting strangely after that, laughing too loudly at nothing, sitting in silence for long periods, just staring. I caught 2 of them building little statues out of sticks and moss, shaped like figures with long, stretched limbs and hollow heads. When I asked where they'd learned it, they both said the same thing. She showed us. Then there were the drawings. In my cabin, I found sketch after sketch stuffed under mattresses, hidden in backpacks. Drawings of the lake, of the woods, of a tall, faceless woman with long fingers and a mouth that opened vertically down her chest. I started dreaming about her, always from a distance at first, watching from the trees. Closer each night, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my flashlight clutched in a white-knuckled grip, the bracelet burning cold on my wrist. By the end of the week, Marcus still hadn't returned from the infirmary. When I asked Martha, she said he'd relapsed. I didn't believe her. So that night, I broke one of the rules. I went to the infirmary after lights out. The building sat apart from the rest of camp, near the edge of the woods. It had no windows, just a single door, locked with a keypad. I tried the handle anyway. To my surprise, it clicked open. Inside, it smelled like rubbing alcohol and mildew. A faint humming filled the air, like a power generator humming through the walls. I crept past empty cots and medical shelves until I reached a heavy steel door at the back. Unlike the others, this one had scratch marks along the frame. Long, deep ones. It was open. Inside was a room with padded walls. A chair bolted to the center. Straps on the arms. No windows. No light, except for a dim red bulb in the ceiling. And there, huddled in the corner, was Marcus. His bracelet was gone. His eyes were black. Not just the irises, everything. Pupil to sclera, glossy and empty. He looked up at me, smiled. "She likes you," he whispered. Then he opened his mouth wide, wider than should have been possible, and screamed. Not a human scream, not even a sound made by lungs. It was like wind and insect wings and cracking trees all at once. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back at my cabin, locking the door, breathing like I'd run miles. I checked my bracelet. It was still on. But I knew now, the rules aren't just to protect us from her. They're to protect her from us. And someone, maybe Martha, maybe the camp itself, is helping her grow stronger. Marcus's eyes weren't human anymore, and his voice wasn't his own. The forest is pulling the kids in one by one, and now I know the rules weren't just suggestions. They're chains. We were warned never to remove the bracelet, never speak to the voice in the trees, never leave the cabin after midnight. But what happens when the rules break themselves? Last night, mine slipped off while I slept, and something was waiting just outside my door. I barely slept after what I saw in the infirmary. Marcus, if that was still Marcus, wasn't alone in that room. I couldn't see her, but I felt her presence in the walls, in the air, inside my chest like something writhing behind my ribs. The next morning, I found my bracelet on the floor. I hadn't taken it off. I never take it off. It was lying there, unclasped, like it had unlatched itself in the night. My wrist burned faintly, like something had touched it. When I opened the cabin door, I expected to see claw marks or footprints in the dirt, some evidence that something had been outside. But the ground was clean, not just undisturbed, pristine, like something had erased the night itself. I put the bracelet back on immediately. Then I noticed one of my campers, Noah, a quiet boy who never smiled, staring at me. His own bracelet was missing. "Noah," I said carefully, "where's your band?" He shrugged. Didn't need it anymore. That chill I felt wasn't just the morning air. I found Jess down by the lake, skipping stones with her boots still on. "I need answers," I said. She didn't look at me. "You went to the infirmary, didn't you?" I nodded. Her jaw tightened. "Then it's already started." "What has?" She turned to face me. "The unraveling. You saw Marcus, what he's become. Once you've seen her touch someone, you can't unsee it. She knows you now. That means she's watching. Why did my bracelet come off?" "She's testing you." "For what?" Jess hesitated. "To see if you'll follow her willingly." Later that day, a new camper arrived, which was strange because no one ever arrived after the first day. Her name was Sylvia, pale, quiet, maybe 13. Her counselor, Ellie, brought her to orientation like it was all normal, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. Something about the girl didn't sit right. She didn't blink often, didn't speak unless spoken to, and when I tried to shake her hand, she simply stared at mine, like she was studying it, memorizing it. That night, I caught her outside past curfew, just standing in the woods barefoot, staring at the trees. "Hey," I called, "you're not supposed to be out here." She turned slowly, her eyes reflecting the moonlight like an animal's. Then she whispered, "She says the bracelets are lies." I didn't sleep that night. The next day, kids began getting sick. Nosebleeds, cold sweats, sudden sleepwalking. More bracelets vanished overnight, and no one could explain it. One boy, James, was found outside curled up in a fetal position whispering, "The roots are in my blood." Martha blamed it on dehydration, ordered the kitchen to double water rations, told us to monitor the kids and keep them mentally grounded. Whatever that meant. Jess cornered me behind the supply shed later. She's growing stronger, she said. The rules only hold her if everyone follows them. But they're cracking. One kid breaks curfew. One counselor enters the woods. One bracelet falls off. It's like poking holes in a dam. So how do we fix it? Just pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly. An old iron pendant, shaped like the camp's pine tree symbol, but covered in symbols I couldn't read. This was my brother's, she said. He was a counselor here 10 years ago. He didn't make it out. I stared at the object. It felt cold, heavier than it should have been. Wear it, Jess said. It's not in the handbook, but it's stronger than the bracelet. If she calls to you again, this might be the only thing that keeps your mind from cracking. I took it, and I felt a pulse in the air the moment it touched my skin. That evening, we held a mandatory bonfire event to boost morale. The kids roasted marshmallows, told sanitized campfire stories, and sang songs none of them seemed to enjoy. Sylvia stood near the treeline, watching, always watching. Then she started humming, a low, droning melody that didn't belong to any camp song. Jess froze. Do you hear that? It was familiar. It was the tune I'd heard in my dreams. The other kids stopped singing. Their heads turned towards Sylvia like she was a beacon. She's summoning, Jess said, grabbing my wrist. We need to stop her now. I moved towards Sylvia, but the fire flared high, bursting with a roar that knocked several campers backward. Sparks ran like meteors. Screams erupted. In the chaos, I lost sight of Sylvia, and when I found her again, she was gone. Just like Emily. That night, the forest changed. It wasn't just the sound of branches creaking or animals scurrying. It breathed. You could hear it, deep, inhaling sighs of moss and rot and whetstone. I stayed awake in my cabin, pinning tight in my grip. The bracelet felt like it was buzzing. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, slow, dragging footsteps just outside my cabin door. I didn't move. They stopped at the threshold. Then a knock. Knock, knock, knock. I almost called out, but the pendant burned hot against my chest. Don't speak back. Instead, I waited, silent. Then the door creaked open. No one was there, just mist curling in around the floorboards. And standing in a mist, just at the edge of the trees, was Sylvia. But she wasn't Sylvia anymore. Her mouth had split horizontally like a second smile, and from it came a voice I recognized. Daniel. It was Marcus's voice. She stepped forward, and the trees behind her leaned in like they wanted to listen. I held up the pendant. The air snapped like static. Her body twitched, and then she was gone. The next morning, Martha called another meeting. Her smile was too wide. Campers are unsettled, she said. It's imperative we maintain order. Starting today, no more talk of disappearances, no mention of bracelets, and no counselor-led searches after dark. I raised my hand. What if they go missing again? Martha didn't even look at me. Then they're no longer our concern. Jess stormed out. I followed. We need to get them out, she whispered. All of them. That's breaking the rules. Her eyes met mine. So what? The rules are broken already. That evening, as we packed supplies in secret, Jess confessed something that chilled me deeper than anything I'd seen. The founder of this camp, she said, wasn't trying to help troubled teens. He was feeding them to her. What? He called it sacred filtering. He believed the strongest minds could resist her, become her disciples. The weak ones were consumed. I felt sick. How long has this been going on? Jess didn't answer, but her silence said enough. As night fell, we moved quickly. A group of 9 kids, our quietest, most withdrawn campers, were chosen first. We led them to the old Ranger Road at the edge of camp, the one hidden behind the archery range. Luis waited there with the camp's only working van. We never made it. Halfway there, the forest closed in. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean the trees moved. Branches shifted. Paths changed. The stars above us blinked out one by one. And from the darkness came a sound, like teeth clicking together in the thousands. "She knows," Jess whispered. The kids screamed as shapes began crawling from the woods, tall, slender, faceless. Their skin pulsed like bark over bone. One of them opened its chest and revealed a black hole filled with teeth. I held up the pendant. It burned like iron on fire. The thing stopped, but only for a second. Then one lunged. It grabbed Luis first, ripped him into the trees. Gone. I grabbed 2 campers and ran. Behind me, I heard Jess yelling, fighting something off. I didn't look back. We burst into the supply shed and slammed the door. Only 4 of us had made it. 2 kids, myself, and one of the metal-cased lanterns flickering wildly. One of the kids was bleeding from his shoulder. The other, Noah, was crying silently. I looked down. His bracelet was gone again. "I didn't take it off," he whispered. "It just let go." I checked mine. Still there. But the metal was cracking. Hairline fractures, splintering like wood under pressure. They told us to follow the rules to stay safe. But now, she's the one writing them. The forest has turned against us. The camp is splintering, and the campers are vanishing one by one. She wears the faces of the people we trust. She whispers in voices we recognize. And last night, she knocked on my door in my own voice. Whatever is haunting these woods has moved into our world. And this time, there's nowhere left to run. The next morning, the fog didn't lift. Not from the trees. Not from the sky. Not from our minds. I barely remembered how we'd made it through the night. My pendant was scorched black, the metal brittle and broken. The 2 campers I saved huddled against the wall of the supply shed, eyes red-rimmed and haunted. Noah hadn't said a word in hours. And then there was me, sitting in a pool of drying blood that wasn't mine. Jess hadn't returned. I knew what that meant. I just couldn't say it. When I finally stepped outside, the camp was too quiet. No laughter, no shouting, no distant songs from the mess hall. And then I saw the cabins. Every single one of them had their doors wide open, as if inviting something in, or as if something had already come. The only place that still felt safe was the rec hall. I found Martha inside, stacking chairs while humming an off-key tune. The windows were shut tight, curtains drawn, and she had a large bottle of bleach open beside her. When she saw me, she smiled. "Martha," I began, "we lost 7 kids last night. Jess is missing. Luis is gone. What the hell is going on?" She didn't stop smiling. "They'll be fine," she said softly. "They've moved on to the next stage." I stared at her. "You knew." "I've always known," she said. "The camp has a cycle. Some years we lose more than others. But the important thing is to preserve balance." "Balance?" I snapped. "We're losing children to something in the woods, and you're cleaning chairs." "She doesn't want chaos," Martha whispered. "She wants structure. That's why we have rules. That's why we wear the bracelets. They aren't for protection. They're for permission. They keep her calm." I looked down at my bracelet. The cracks had widened. "What happens when they all break?" I asked. Martha's eyes softened. "Then she no longer needs us." I ran from the rec hall. I had to find the kids, the ones that were still left. Something inside me said time was short, but the camp was shifting again, folding in on itself like a dying star. As I passed cabin F, I heard humming. That same melody Sylvia had sung at the bonfire. I stepped inside, slow and careful. Sylvia was sitting on a bunk bed, facing the wall. She didn't move when I entered. "Where are the others?" I asked. She didn't respond. "Sylvia." She finally turned her head, and her face was not hers anymore. It was Jess's, perfectly copied, down to the tiny scar on her chin. But the eyes, they were hollow, like they'd been scooped out and filled with something ancient and amused. "She likes your voice," it said. "She thinks you'd make a good vessel." I backed up. The thing in Sylvia's body rose from the bed, bones cracking with every movement. Then it smiled. "You're going to help her bloom." I ran. By noon, 5 more campers were missing. The dining hall had collapsed. The nurse's station was empty. The paths no longer led where they used to. One camper swore they saw the lake on the wrong side of the camp. Another claimed she followed the hiking trail for hours and came right back to where she started. The forest was folding in on itself. I found Noah by the lake again, standing at the edge like he wanted to step in. "She called me last night," he said. "She used your voice." He turned to me. "She said if I bring you to her, she'll let me go." I stepped back. "No." He lunged. We fought. He wasn't strong, but he was possessed, driven by something not entirely human. His bracelet had disintegrated. His skin was pale, veins dark and branching like roots. I pinned him, screaming his name, until something in his eyes flickered. Recognition. He sobbed. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to." He passed out. I carried him back to the infirmary, only to find it transformed. The beds were gone. In their place, carvings. Thousands of symbols etched into the wood and walls. Jagged spirals, teeth-like slashes, pine trees with eyes in the middle. And on the far wall, Jess. Alive, barely, tied to the beams, eyes wide open, breathing shallow. "Jess!" I ran to her, cutting her down with a scalpel. She gasped. "She's inside the cabins now." "I know," I said. She spoke through Sylvia. Jess shook her head weakly. "Not just Sylvia. She's multiplying, splitting herself into the ones who remove their bracelets. That's what the rules are for. They're seals." I stared at her. "We need to leave." "There's no more leaving," she said. "We're inside her now." By sunset, the camp looked like a different world. The fog had turned dark, tinged with green and black like bruised air. The sun was a red smear in the sky. The trees pulsed. I gathered the last campers I could find. 8 of them, all scared, all silent. We held a vote. Do we stay and follow what little of the rules remain? Or do we run? Half wanted to stay. Half wanted to make a break for the old fire road, even if it was covered in roots now. "Everyone grab salt," I said. "From the kitchens, if it's still intact. And anything iron." Jess stood beside me, holding a flare gun. "We head out at dawn," she said. "Until then, lock your doors. Don't speak to anything that sounds familiar. If someone knocks, don't answer. If you feel your bracelet coming loose, tie it with wire." Then, from the trees, we heard it, singing. High, sweet, distant. But it was all our voices, layered together. And beneath them, something low and wet and ancient, breathing just under the sound. "She's preparing her vessel," Jess whispered. I already knew who it was. That night, I stayed in cabin C with the remaining campers. I poured salt at every window, hung iron keys from the rafters. The flare gun rested in my lap, and then the knocking began. Each door, each window, in perfect rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Then her voice. "Let me in, Daniel. You're the one she wants. It'll stop if you just come outside." The campers cried. I didn't move. But then, one door opened. Someone didn't listen. It was Liam, a younger boy who hadn't spoken much all week. He stepped out into the fog and vanished. Jess found me an hour later. "We have to end it," she said. "There's one place we haven't tried. The Founder's Bunker." It was an old story. Every counselor knew it. The founder of the camp, James Ainsley, had built a secret underground bunker to contain the source of what haunted these woods. Most thought it was a myth, but Jess had a map, and we were out of time. We left at 2 a.m., only the two of us, armed with a map, iron bars, flare guns, salt. We made it past the archery range, down the dry creek, into the hollow where nothing grows. And there we found it, a rusted hatch beneath the earth, covered in pine needles and bones. The moment we opened it, the ground screamed. Not the air, the earth itself. We climbed down anyway, and into the dark. What we found below was not a bunker. It was a cathedral. Roots wrapped the stone walls like veins. The air was thick with rot and whispers. Symbols glowed faintly on the floor, spirals that spun even without motion. And in the center, a mirror, framed in bones, standing alone. Jess gasped. That's how she enters them, through reflections. As we approached, the mirror rippled, and she stepped out. Not a monster, not a creature. Me, an exact replica, from head to toe. "You've come far," she said in my voice. "But this is where it ends. Let me in, and I'll spare them." Jess raised her flare gun. "Do it," I whispered, but the doppelganger smiled. "She already has." The mirror shattered. The ground cracked. The tunnel collapsed behind us. I don't remember what happened after that, only that I woke up on the forest floor, alone, covered in blood, and my bracelet was gone. I survived the mirror. I survived her. But survival means nothing when you can't trust your own reflection. Camp Clearwater is falling apart, cabin by cabin, soul by soul. The rules are broken, the seals are gone, and the thing in the woods no longer hides in shadows. She's here. She wears our faces. And the final rule, the one they never wrote down, is the only one that can stop her. But to follow it, I'll have to make the ultimate choice, destroy what's left of myself. I woke up surrounded by roots, twisted, writhing, alive. They pulsed with a slow, rhythmic heartbeat that didn't feel like my own. For a moment, I thought I was dead. Then I opened my eyes and saw the forest above me, churning with red clouds. Something massive moved behind the trees, something with long limbs and hundreds of eyes that never blinked. The ground around me steamed with rot. My bracelet was gone. The salt I'd carried had melted to sludge. The flare gun, empty. And Jess was gone. I staggered to my feet, bleeding from one ear, disoriented. My memories from the mirror room were fragmented, like a shattered VHS tape. I remembered her voice. My voice. The sound of glass splintering. And then darkness. What I didn't remember was how I survived, or if I still was me. Camp Clearwater was unrecognizable. The cabins were hollowed husks. There was blackened and weeping sap like blood. The dining hall had collapsed into the earth, as though devoured from below. The rec hall was on fire, its windows flickering with images of counselors who died decades ago, smiling through scorched curtains. Only one place still stood intact. Cabin Z, the one the map had never marked. I'd never seen it before. It stood at the edge of the forest where no trail led. But now, something called me to it. A compulsion, not a choice. My name echoed in the wind, over and over. until I opened the door. Inside Cabin Z, it was sterile. White walls, fluorescent lights, like a medical facility buried in the woods. And there, sitting on a cot, was Jess. Alive, awake, smiling, but wrong. Too clean, too calm. Jess, I whispered. She turned her head slowly. You made it. I was hoping you would. Her voice was too flat, too balanced, just like Martha said she wanted. She's in you, I said. Jess nodded. She needed a vessel. Your mirror cracked before she could finish you. But me? Her eyes darkened. I broke my rule. I stepped back. She stood up. There's one final rule they never tell new counselors. The one written in blood behind the founder's portrait in the old office. The only rule that truly matters. She tilted her head. Do not let her finish the cycle. The cycle. The summer. The campers. The games. The vanishing kids. The counselors always rotating out. This wasn't a camp. It was a ritual. A seasonal offering. Every summer, new souls fed to something ancient and forgotten in exchange for peace, prosperity, or maybe just survival. And now, the cycle was almost done. Only one piece remained. I ran. I didn't even try to fight her. There was no fighting what Jess had become. The trees closed around me as I sprinted through the forest toward the chapel ruins. The place where the founder had first made his deal with her, where the rules were first carved in stone. If there was an answer, anything that could end this, it was there. I tripped over a root and fell hard. When I looked up, the chapel was in front of me, burned to the foundation. Only the altar remained. On it, a journal, ash-covered, bound in skin. I flipped it open. Inside were lists of names, counselors and campers dating back to the 1950s, each followed by a word. Vessel, sacrifice, witness, offering. And then I saw my name, Daniel Reyes, final witness. And beneath that, the rule. If the final witness breaks their own reflection, the cycle ends. But they must believe it is truly them inside. The mirror, the one I'd seen underground. If I'd accepted that version of myself, if I'd destroyed it thinking it was really me, I would have completed the cycle. But I hadn't. I'd hesitated. That hesitation had bought us time, but not much. From a forest behind me, I heard my voice, calling campers' names, laughing softly, weeping, dozens of versions, a chorus of falsehoods. They were all her now. I sprinted through the ruins, searching for anything reflective. And then I found it. A shard of the founder's mirror, cracked but intact. I held it up and saw myself, not twisted, not corrupted, just me. And I didn't know if I could trust it. Behind me, Jess emerged from the trees, eyes white, limbs too long. Finish it, she said. It's the only way. You're the final piece. Break your reflection. Give yourself to her. And it ends. I looked at the mirror and at her, and suddenly I knew. This was the last lie, the final trick. She wanted me to think it was over if I gave in. But the truth was the opposite. If I destroyed my true self, she'd take the empty space left behind. No, I said. I dropped the mirror, unbroken, and pulled a flare gun from my belt. I aimed it at the chapel, at the altar, at the cycle, and fired. The world exploded in white flame. Roots screamed. The trees buckled. The faces in the smoke shrieked and melted. Jess lunged, but not at me. At the journal, at the mirror, at the altar that anchored her. I tackled her, holding her back as fire consumed everything. She writhed in my arms, her skin shifting between faces. Mine, Jess's, the campers. And then she screamed in a voice that was all of them at once. The fire turned black. When I opened my eyes, the sun was rising. Clear skies, birdsong, no fog, no howling. Camp Clearwater was quiet, peaceful, empty. I found the remaining campers wandering near the lake, confused but unharmed. Their bracelets were whole again, their memories hazy. When I asked about Jess, no one remembered her, not even the staff. It was as if she'd never existed. They closed the camp that day. An emergency evacuation. Parents were called. Buses arrived. No explanations. No questions. I left last. I looked back once, and in the window of Cabin Z, I saw her. Not Jess. Not me. Something else. Watching. Waiting. I don't wear bracelets anymore. I avoid mirrors. And I don't take jobs that require summer housing. Because I've learned the truth. Some rules aren't meant to be followed. Some are meant to warn. And the most important ones, they're the ones no one ever tells you about. The end.